Did you guys see the news about Devondre Campbell? Yeah, that's it. No joke or anything. Besides that. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews. I'm your host, John Dowray. Today, obviously, previewing Packers versus Seahawks, the upcoming Sunday night football matchup. I don't want to say expected to be playoff teams. Packers certainly are expected. Seahawks a little bit more on the fringe. We're going to talk about that a little bit. But a very, very large matchup coming up Sunday night for the NFC playoff picture as the Packers and Seahawks square off in Seattle. So, I bring up Devondre Campbell. Going against Seattle, there may be a certain reliving of grievances, like Devondre Campbell did against the Packers when he departed. Well, going into Seattle, obviously it evokes memories of Hail Mary, of a certain NFC Championship game that we do not need to dwell upon. And now for this matchup, one of the brightest uniform matchups maybe ever. I took that graphic from Yahoo Sports. The Packers are going to be in their all whites, including that white helmet that was debuted this year. And the Seattle Seahawks are going to be in their highlighter green, their lime green. It's so bright uniform. I don't know. Maybe it's a hot take. I personally don't love it. But white versus lime green, it's going to be quite the bright affair under the lights on Sunday night. So we're obviously going to go through this whole matchup, going to talk about the injuries as the Packers just unveiled their injury report. And not as good as we were hoping for. I'll talk about that, and then Seahawks, and really just kind of look over this matchup as well as talk about who the Seahawks are. Before we totally get to that, though, I do just want to say a very quick thank you. Obviously, over the course of this week, we've announced that this podcast, the Lombardi Time Brews, is going to be coming to an end when the season ends. And since then, we've gotten a pretty tremendous outpouring of support and thanks from a lot of you. And it has meant a lot to Claudia and I. I know that I haven't gotten the chance to respond to each and every person yet who has reached out, be it through a YouTube comment or even a couple of messages that I've gotten. So know that I will be doing that, and know that any words that you're leaving for us, they are heard, they are felt, and thank you very, very much. I did want to make sure that I said that. So let's get to these injury reports. And like I said, this is not as great for the Packers as we thought. Now, they are still a team that is getting healthier, but after the mini bye, I think that there was at least one player that we had some higher hopes for. So obviously, I know it might be a little fuzzy there due to sizing and all that kind of stuff, but there is the Packers injury report, at least as of yesterday. The graphic for Friday hasn't been released yet. This is the graphic for Thursday, but then also what LaFleur said in practice today. Javon Bullard, he's going to be out with that ankle injury. This was very, very expected. Hasn't practiced at all this week. Man was in a boot as of Sunday. He's basically week to week with that ankle injury, so not at all shocked to see him not going. The one, though, that isn't on that graphic and really kind of sucks, Jaire Alexander is out for this game. Now, Jaire Alexander, he got in full practices earlier this week. Wednesday, Thursday, they were both full practices. And then today, no practice. He's going to be logged as a DNP when that graphic is released. And when asked about it in his press conference, Matt LaFleur basically said, yes, he got into full practices, and basically we went back, we looked at those two practices, and he just wasn't moving normally enough. He wasn't hitting the speed thresholds. So why are we not going to play him even when he's slower? He said, because frankly, we don't want a repeat of Chicago. And what that says to me is basically the Packers are saying here, look, we could trot out a less than great Jaire with that PCL injury, but we are afraid if we do that it's going to get worse. It's going to be a setback, and then we're going to miss out on him for a playoff run. So this sucks. You want to have Jaire out there. It just feels like we do this every freaking week with Jaire. The will he, won't he? It's been going on for like a couple of seasons now, it's felt like. But the reality is, if you gave me the choice, hey, Jaire Alexander's, it sucks, but it's true. Jaire Alexander's going to play in like half your games. Would you rather it be in week 15 when your playoff seeding is mostly determined already? Or would you rather it be later on for the playoffs? I think we're all probably choosing the playoffs, right? And I think that that's where the Packers are at too. If he's not 100%, we're not going to roll him out there because we're not going to risk a setback. So let's sit him. Let's get him ready for future weeks. Okay. Other updates here. Obviously, Luke Musgrave, he has been, his practice window has been opened. He's practiced at least a couple of days this week. Nonetheless, though, I'm sure he's not going to go this week. Even Jordan Love at his locker said yesterday that they're very excited for Musgrave to be back. They look forward to having him on the field before the end of the season. Vis-a-vis, not this week is basically what it is. Also irrelevant to this game, but I know some people have been asking, what's the deal with Jordan Morgan? When is he coming back? It doesn't look like anytime soon. Beat reporters saw him yesterday with a sling over his shoulder. Doesn't sound like that man's coming back anytime soon. Okay, but now the rest is actually good news because Edgerrin Cooper going to be good to go. Matt LaFleur confirmed as much, and Cooper said to Bill Huber yesterday at his locker that it's going to happen. So Edgerrin Cooper's going to be back. Also, Evan Williams and Romeo Doubs got in full practices all this week. They have cleared concussion protocol. They are both good to go, and that, especially with Jair out and Bullard out, they really needed Williams to go, and he is going to go. Now, in terms of how the Packers handle these injuries, I think in the secondary, realistically, what you're looking at, Stokes and Valentine are going to continue playing a bunch. Maybe even if Valentine is going to go, maybe you mix in some Valentine, some Rochelle, but obviously it's going to come down to Stokes and Valentine on the boundaries. I think with Bullard out, Nixon probably, even though he's played better on the boundary in the slot, I think he probably slides back into the slot and just kind of becomes the Bullard replacement. Then Williams and X are your safeties with maybe some mixing in, again, of a little bit of Zane Anderson, who, frankly, after his play last week, kind of deserves more snaps. As I've said, it's a weird world we're living in these days. Zane Anderson might play some defenses like a third safety. We'll have to see how that goes. Now, looking at the Seattle side of things, I know that's a freakishly long list, and it's Friday afternoon, and they're on the West Coast. We're not even close to getting their graphic, but that is a freakishly long list, and yet 99% of that list doesn't matter. Trey Brown would be a starting corner for them. He hasn't played since week 6. It looks like he's going to be out again. But other than that, a lot of these guys were vet rest days yesterday. The only real injury conversation here, as I've dove into Seattle Seahawks blogs, news, etc., is the concern about Kenneth Walker. Now, he hasn't practiced at all this week with a calf injury. Yesterday, Coach Mike McDonald said that it's not a long-term concern, that he's officially day-to-day. He also mentioned that while he'd love to get Walker out there for at least one practice, he doesn't necessarily need to get out there for a practice in order to play. Still, though, the way that McDonald sounded when he said these things, every possible indication from Seattle, plus the fact that Charbonnet has been playing great as a feature back whenever Walker isn't there, it just seems like all signs are pointing to Kenneth Walker not going in this game. None of that. That's it. Yeah, they got a couple guys on IR, which we'll certainly be talking about as we go through the depth chart, but that's it. They're a pretty healthy team. So, who are the Seahawks? Well, they're sitting at 8-5. They are an undeniably and impressively so streaky team. They're winners of 4 straight, and they are probably riding the highest of highs in their streaks right now. So who are those 5 losses against? Well, they've gotten losses against the Lions. Well, that's a fine loss. The 49ers, depending on when in the season, that's a fine loss. The Bills, that's a fine loss. The Rams, and then they also lost to the Giants. So that's their 5 losses. But they've gotten wins against the Broncos, Patriots, Dolphins, Falcons, 49ers, Cardinals, Jets, and again, Cardinals. They've completed the season sweep. So kind of like the Packers, they've beaten the teams that they're supposed to beat, right? That they've beaten the teams that their record says that they should beat, with the Giants being the exception. And they've lost to the teams that their record says that they should lose to. So kind of a similar boat here. But how the Seahawks have done it is just a roller coaster thus far. They started out the season 3-0 with 2 of those wins coming at home. Then they dropped 3-0 to get themselves to 3-3, 2 of those losses coming at home. Then they got themselves a road win against the Falcons, got them right back up above 500 again. Then they dropped 2 at home to fall back below 500. And then came their bye. And since their bye, just about a month ago, this is a different team. They have ripped off 4 straight wins, 3 of which have been on the road, including their last 2. And in their last 2, they've put up over 25 points scored. They've only done that 5 times in the year. 40% of those games have come in the last 2 weeks. But it should be noted, as you might have been putting together as I was rattling all that off, they're a better team on the road than they are at home, at least record-wise. They're 3-4 at home and 5-1 on the road. So let's take a look at the Seattle Seahawks and this depth chart. Obviously, they got Geno Smith. They're starting at quarterback. Running back, Walker probably going to be out. Charbonnet, more than competent, feature back in Walker's stead. Then looking at wide receivers. No, their depth is not tremendous, but boy, those top 3, yeah, they're pretty good. You got DK Metcalf as their number 1 wide receiver, undoubtedly. I know it's got a little Q right next to his name on the depth chart. You can safely ignore that. It looks like he's going to be just fine. Jackson Smith and Jigba, who is becoming the receiver that everyone thought he could be in the draft process. He's on a tear as of late. And then old man Rocket Lockett, he is still contributing. Then a great receiving tight end in Noah Fant as well, who thus far on the year, his receptions to targets, very, very healthy for tight ends. Then you look at the offensive line, and they do have some depth things here. Fant on IR. Bradford was the starting right guard. He wound up on IR. Forsythe got some starts earlier in the year. Now he's on IR. But still, this is most of the preferred starters for the Seahawks. Charles Cross at left tackle, probably their best offensive lineman. Laken Tomlinson left guard. And then you kind of get down the list to right tackle, Abraham Lucas. He's missed some time. He should be around for this game. The one worth highlighting here, though, I'm going to talk about him in a little bit, Lumea. He's filling in for Bradford, who's the preferred starting right guard, and he's had some results that are less than savory for Seahawk fans. Then flipping over to their 3-4 base defensive end, and I think you could say, like, yeah, they're a 3-4 defense, but also they run a lot of nickel. Like, I would argue that nickel is actually their true base defense. But looking at the line, look, I mean, Leonard Williams, Jerron Reed, yeah, that's former Packer Jerron Reed. He played like 1 year in Green Bay. Jonathan Hankins. So those are your 3 starters. But then beyond that, Byron Murphy plays a ton. Roy Robertson Harris plays a ton. They rotate so heavily on the D-line. And I would say there might not be another team in the league that's as deep on the defensive line as the Seattle Seahawks. It's really impressive. And they rotate them a ton. And they keep them fresh. And it's part of how they've been stopping the run over the last month. So, I mean, it is a very, very good defensive line. Then you get to the linebackers back here. And you see Mafe, Hall. They got a shout out this week, even from a Seattle beat writer that I'll talk about in a little bit. But then they also rotate a lot here on the edge, playing Nwosu and Jones a lot. And then you get to the secondary. Tariq Woolen, Bryant, Love, Trey Brown, who I talked about. Brown, he's not going to be playing. I'm sure of it. Devin Witherspoon, the guy there in the nickel. It looks as though Josh Jobe, was a practice squad signing earlier in the year for the Seahawks, looks as though he's going to be getting another start for Trey Brown, and he's actually doing a lot better than I think a lot of people expected. Then you got Jason Myers and Michael Dixon rounding out the special teams unit. So, all right, let's talk more about these Seahawks and their stats. Where do the Seahawks rank in terms of all these things? Defensively, they're a really good unit, and they're on the rise. Keep in mind, Mike McDonald used to be the defensive coach for the Baltimore Ravens, and he has brought that system over, that kind of like hybrid D system, to Seattle, and it's doing really good work. Perhaps better now than it's been in any course in the year. So over their last 3 weeks, in terms of rushing against, they're giving up 86.3 yards per game on the ground. That's 5th best in the NFL. But correlating with that, in terms of running against them, they've been run on less than anyone in the NFL. No one's trying to run on the Seahawks over the last 3 weeks. Then in terms of passing, they're giving up 217.7 yards per game through the air. That's 10th best in the NFL. Yet, listen to this, 10th best yardage in the NFL. But on the flip side, attempts against them, 9th most. That is one of the largest gaps between attempts to results that we've seen in any game this year. Their pass defense is doing work. Also, in terms of full season defense stats, just so you're aware, 21.8 points per game puts them at 11th best in the NFL. Red zone, 52.17%, turn into touchdowns against them in the red zone. That's 11th in the NFL. And we've talked about how, the Packers' red zone offense, it's been pretty bad, but they've gone routinely against, the best red zone defenses in the league week in and week out. Well, in the last 3, Jacksonville is giving up only 37.5% being touchdowns. That's second best in the NFL. So the trend of the Packers going against good red zone defenses continues. Also, they're allowing only 4 third down conversions per game out of 12.3 attempts. Yeah, that's pretty healthy too. This is a good third down defense. Now let's flip it over. Let's look at the offensive side of the ball for the Seahawks over the last 3. They are getting 108.3 yards per game on the ground, 15th in the NFL. Attempts, dead middle, perfect correlation. In terms of passing, they're getting 209.3 yards per game through the air over the last 3, 23rd in the NFL. Actually a pretty steep drop off. On the season, they're averaging about 249 yards per game through the air. So big fall off over the last 3. And then in terms of attempts over the last 3, 25th most. They're not even passing the ball that much anymore. Kind of a Green Bay-like regression there in that regard in terms of attempts. Then some full season stats for you. In terms of points per game, they're putting up 23.2. That's 14th in the NFL. Red zone, 54.29% for their red zone offense. That's 19th in the NFL. And you know what? By golly, that's under Green Bay. Green Bay's been getting better. Turnovers per game, they're sitting at negative 0.3. That's 22nd in the NFL. But in their last 3, like I said, Geno hasn't been throwing as much. That's helped their turnover margin. Positive 0.7 over their last 3. Sacks gotten, they get 2.5 sacks per game. It's 15th sacks given up. This is not good. 3.1 sacks given up per game, 24th in the NFL. And then in terms of penalties, again, we're going against a team worse than Green Bay. This is refreshing. They get called on them 7.5 penalties per game. And in yards, that's 58 penalty yards per game, 25th in the NFL, both worse than Green Bay. Okay, so let's look at both sides of the ball here. How do you handle the Seahawks offense? Let's get a couple things just kind of out of the way first. The offensive line for the Seahawks, overall, gotta say, this is probably a below average unit. They've had 5 different tackles play for them this year. And per PFF's tracking of sacks, at least, those 5 tackles have given up a combined 15 sacks. 5 is from, 33% of those sacks is from their likely best offensive lineman at left tackle Charles Cross. He's given up 5. On the other side, preferred starter Abraham Lucas, he's back, but even then, his pass blocking efficiency has been kind of a less than stellar 95%. On the interior, as I mentioned, Bradford, he's on IR, so Lumea starting at right guard. And he is one of the worst starting guards in the NFL over his stretch of starting. And it's not like he's a great pass blocker and then is really bad at run blocking or vice versa. Nope. Bad across the board. So, Kenny, you found your new Bradbury. And then in terms of running, yeah, I mentioned how Kenneth Walker, really good feature back. He's great. Obviously, his Seahawks would prefer to have him. But Charbonnet's been awfully good when he gets his chance. In the 3 games that Zach Charbonnet has been the lead back for Seattle, he's averaged over 5 yards per carry twice. In those 3 games, he's got 5 rushing touchdowns, and he also has at least 3 receptions per game. Last week in Arizona, he amassed 193 total scrimmage yards on 29 touches and got 2 touchdowns. Like I said, whether Walker is there or not, they will have a potent run game. But this offense probably goes as Geno goes. That's kind of been the narrative of the year. As he goes, that's how the Seahawks offense goes. And so does DK and Fant and JSN and Old Man Rocket. The reality is, just like Love, Geno Smith started the year pretty turnover prone. He was amongst the league leaders in interceptions for a good stretch of the year. He's sitting at 12 picks on the year versus only 14 interceptions. But as the season's gone on, he's gotten a lot better with ball security. And as Jeff Hafley said, they'll throw it over you. On throws over 20 yards downfield, he has thrown 4 interceptions. But he has 19 big-time throws versus only 3 turnover-worthy plays. Over 10% of his attempts go deep. That's what Hafley's talking about. Over 10% of Geno's throws go over 20 yards downfield in the air. But it's kind of boom or bust because he's rocking only a 46.2% completion percentage on those throws. Where he's actually really accurate is on quicker, shorter yak style throws. Per Sports Info Solutions, the Seahawks are one of the best teams when doing a short drop throw. They have the 5th highest success rate in the NFL on those types of throws. Just last week, Geno Smith on that style of throw, a quick drop throw, was 8 of 9 for 58 yards. 50 of those 58 yards were yak yards. As for where the Packers rank in defending quick drop passes, dead last. That's not a great matchup. Dead last in the NFL. And remember how we said last week how the Packers have gotten really bad? Like as their run defense has gotten better, they've gotten really bad at defending the middle of the field. Well, Geno's pretty good there. Overall, from line of scrimmage forward, so a forward pass in the middle of the field, Geno is 132 for 171, and he has 1,569 yards in the middle of the field, about 45% of his total yardage. So while the Seahawks, they may throw a deep ball or two, they may complete a deep ball or two, I'm a lot more worried about their quick game. DK, JSN, Lockett, even Charbonnet out of the backfield, who, like I said, 29 touches last week, 7 of those were receptions. He can absolutely get the ball through the air. And those kinds of things against Green Bay, as of late, have been lethal. Green Bay's linebackers, in the form of Walker, McDuffie, even with Cooper being back out there, they are going to have to be better against the pass than they've been over the last 3 weeks, or they're going to play right into what has become Geno's greatest strength over the last month. So, how can the Packers solve this? I feel like I say it every week, but it's the reality. Pressure, pressure. Over 38% of Geno's dropbacks, he gets pressured on. But, let's keep that number in mind. 38% of the dropbacks, he gets pressured. But under pressure, he has 5 times the interceptions versus when he's kept clean. He has more than triple the turnover-worthy play rate. He's got nearly half the QB rating. And he's 20% lower on both completion percentage and adjusted completion percentage. So, if he's kept clean, he does have the ability to kill you deep. He can kill you short, too. But if he's under pressure, he gets reckless, even lately. And that might be the key. So now let's talk about how to beat the Seahawks defense. Honestly, that's tough. That's a tall order. They are playing out of their mind right now for Coach McDonald, especially since the bye. In fact, over like most metrics, like we're not talking about yardage or anything like that, but like you can dive into DVOA, points per drive, like all the like more advanced stuff, right? If you want to dive into that, over the last 4 weeks, they are one of the best defenses in the NFL. So I noted that earlier teams just aren't running on them. And sometimes we look at these correlations about like attempts versus yardage and like whether it's because of game flow or whatever. Nope. Teams don't like running on the Seahawks because the Seahawks have legit been good against the run as of late. Leonard Williams is having one of the best years of his career in the middle. Jerron Reed has been having a above average year against the run for him. But per Seahawks writer Michael Sean Duger in an interview with Matt Schneidman for The Athletic, he cites improved edge play as a big reason for the success of the Seahawks against the run. But nonetheless, I'm just kind of feeling like the Seahawks, yeah, they're a good run defense. But the Packers are going against a very explosive offense. They're still missing their number 1 corner in Jair. I don't mind if Green Bay walks into this game like it's a San Francisco-style slugfest, like it's a Detroit-style slugfest, like it's playing against Miami, where they're not relying on 30, 40, 50 Jordan Love pass attempts, where they're willing to grind it out with Josh Jacobs, even against a good run defense. Josh Jacobs is still top 3 in the NFL at rushing between the tackles. I think this is a game where you got to try to keep them off the field and just grind it up the middle. For the passing offense, though, the grand X factor here, if you are going to move the ball through the air, might just be Jayden Reed. Because Jayden Reed is coming off of an all-time clunker of a game. 0 catches, 1 target, 1 drop. Not good. Also, if he's like the closest thing you have to number 1 receiver, you're probably going to want to scheme him just a couple more opportunities to touch the ball than what they did last week. And LaFleur has mentioned that they have to do a better job at doing that. And generally speaking, when we see LaFleur, like if it's not the run game, he's ignored for years, right? Until now. But generally speaking, when he does talk about making sure that a receiver gets more opportunities, they generally do thereafter. So I think that this could be a Jayden Reed game. And he's going to be going against Devin Witherspoon, who plays most of the slot snaps for Seattle. Witherspoon, he's been pretty good this year. 88.9 QB rating allowed when targeted. But he also leads the Seahawks in missed tackles. He also leads the Seahawks in penalties. Jayden Reed, good at drawing contact from defenders. Jayden Reed, very good for his size at making guys miss. That could be one of the matchups that the Packers do look to exploit when airing the ball out. So I think that this is a heavy Josh Jacobs and potentially Jayden Reed game. So, looking at this whole thing, I think that there are matchups to exploit here for Green Bay. I think that Green Bay is overall the better, certainly more consistent team. But I just don't have tremendous vibes going into this game. Seattle is a notoriously tough place to play. Seattle is riding the highest of their high streak for the year. They are fighting desperately. Look, if the Seattle Seahawks lose this game, then they fall out of their place in the NFC West division. They won't be the division leader anymore. In fact, they'll be on the outside of the playoff picture looking in. They have to keep winning to keep their chances alive. Meanwhile, the Green Bay Packers have a 97% chance of making the playoffs at all. The certainty that they are going to be like the 5 or 6 seed is basically locked in at this point. It would have to be a cataclysmic failure of like losing out to even stand a chance to not make the playoffs. So what I feel here is there are two teams that are on very similar trajectories, like they're only one game apart in terms of record. But the Seahawks are fighting week in and week out to even make the dance. While the Packers are looking at this and going, we got to stack a couple more wins, but the more important thing is that we are fine-tuning things, that we are fixing our problems, because weeks 15, 16, 17, they don't matter as much as weeks 19, 20, 21, right? So I feel like these are two teams who are in similar circumstances, but very, very different pathways. And given, this week's injury report, I'm not going to lie, Jerry Alexander not playing this week after it looked like for sure he was going to, at least for me, that's pretty freaking deflating going against DK and JSN. This is a game you really wanted him out there. So Green Bay is the better team. I would say that. Green Bay probably should win. I think it's incredibly reasonable, though, to say that this might be the first game that Green Bay should win that they wind up losing. It's just that's the feel that I've got right now. And I would say too, looking ahead throughout the rest of the season for Green Bay, I really like the pathway right now. I can just see it clearly. They drop this one on Sunday Night Football. Then recover. If you're looking for that blowout game where it all just clicks, where they just stomp someone into the ground, that's next week. Monday Night Football at home in December, 2 days before Christmas against the Saints. That's got Green Bay football written all over it. So drop the game in Seattle, pick up your win against the Saints, pick up your signature win the next week against Minnesota, and then in traditional fashion, close out the season with a stomping of Chicago and propel yourself into the playoffs on a 3-game win streak. Doesn't that feel right? At least it does to me. So I'm just falling into the camp of, I think that this is a game that Seattle is just so hot right now, and Green Bay is in a position where they don't have to win this game. So it wouldn't shock me at all if the coin flips the other way, but I'm going to go Seattle 27, Green Bay 24. And it just feels like the kind of game, these two teams might see each other again in 2 weeks. And even in this matchup, it's going to have the feel to me that even if Seattle wins, boy, you just really don't mind Green Bay playing them again. It's kind of where I'm at. If you feel where I'm at. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me here at Lombardi Time Brews. Join us on Sunday for the watch party. Claudia and I will be sitting here all Sunday night long, checking out Packers versus Seahawks, where hopefully I'm dead wrong in every way. And this is the game where it all clicks for the Green Bay Packers. Have an absolutely fantastic weekend, everybody. And as always, go Pack Go.